Welcome back to WCB Jazz Vinyl. It has been an exhausting week in terms of reissue announcements, but obviously in a really exciting way. Between Rhino's High Fidelity series, Jackpot put out an announcement. We had Blue Note just last week. But what else do we have this week? Well, we had Jazz Dispensary put out their titles, or at least another title to add to the one that they announced recently. And then Contemporary Records, in their partnership with Acoustic Sounds, also put out an announcement. So there's a lot of really exciting stuff to cover. In order to make this at least somewhat manageable, what I'm going to do today is I want to cover Jazz Dispensary and the Acoustic Sounds Contemporary Records partnership. And the reason why I want to cover those two together is because they're both under the Craft Recordings subsidiary, Craft Recordings, which is a subsidiary of Concord. So we're covering 14 titles, 2 Jazz Dispensary and 12, I think it's just 12 that are coming out as part of the Contemporary Records series in 2024. As always, hit like and subscribe. These are the ways, they cost you nothing, and these are the ways you let YouTube know that you like this content, and then they recommend it to others, and that is what helps me out and gives me energy with making more and more videos. What else? You can go over to Instagram and follow me. I'm at what_can_brown. All right, so let's dive right in. And just so you know, I will be telling you, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pick 5 top favorites out of this entire list to say, hey, these are the ones that if I were you, or at least these are the ones that I'd be most interested in pre-ordering, because this is 14 titles just across like these sort of 2 series. There's a lot of stuff out there, and labels continue to put out stuff, and I want to help at least point you in the right direction, what I think are the most worthwhile stuff. But let's dive right in. And actually, out of all these 14, there's only 3 that I don't already have copies of. I'll point those out. All right, so the first title we're going to talk about is Johnny Lytle's People and Love. This was originally put out on the Milestone label. So who do we have in the lineup on this thing? Well, Giselle Carter, Arthur Jenkins, Betty Glamon, who is it's just such a surprising name to see this late, I suppose. So she's a harpist. I covered her in the video that I made about Dorothy Ashby, I think. There's Daoud Hadi, there's Bob Cranshaw, and there's Marvin Cabell, obviously in addition to Johnny Lytle. So in terms of what Jazz Dispensary is doing with this thing, well, it's cut by Kevin Gray at Coherent Audio. It's pressed on 180 gram vinyl at RTI. Each of the titles in their top shelf series have been fantastic, and both in terms of them picking great music, but also in terms of it sounding great and being of high quality. So, that's encouraging. This thing is only priced at $30. I say only. That seems like 5 years ago we'd be saying, what, 30? But these days, only 30. So if I was going to point you to a particular track, I would say that the highlight is Where Is the Love? So this one starts out, and you're going to be like wanting to tune out almost immediately, I got to be honest. It starts out a little easy listening in style, but seriously stick with it, because in very short order, it really picks up with Lytle's solo over this really grooving bass line. And there's a lot to love, I think, about Johnny Lytle's People in Love. So this title is going to be out on February 16th. And actually, the pre-order is open right now already, so you can go to Jazz Dispensary or Craft's website and give that thing a either go and preview it or go and order it. So the second title shares some similarities with that first one, right? So $30, cut by Kevin Gray at Coherent and pressed on 180 gram vinyl at RTI. We just heard about this one, I think officially on Monday of this week, and this one is really exciting. This is one that when Jazz Dispensary asks people in its little channel that it manages on Instagram, ask people what they want. Everyone says, I want Joe Henderson on Milestone. There's I don't even know how many titles that Joe Henderson put out on Milestone, but this is one of the most exciting of the bunch. And that is Joe Henderson's Power to the People. You'll note, I'm not going to try to cover it. I've got some water damage on this thing. So, it's not the prettiest to look at, but it sure does sound great. So I kind of just deal with it. All right, so what about this thing? This is, I would call it a combination of acoustic as well as electric instruments and even pieces. So in the lineup, you've got Ron Carter, Joe Henderson, Jack DeJohnette, Herbie Hancock, and then you also have Mike Lawrence. Mike Lawrence is a trumpet player. He plays on a couple of these tracks anyway. He's not on the entire thing. If I was going to point you to a particular track that I think is great, and I think the whole thing is great, Black Narcissus is the one maybe to start with if you're just kind of dipping your toe in. Why I like that one so much is because I think it's a great balance of this idea that it's both an acoustic as well as an electric album. So you have Ron Carter's like very acoustic sounding bass next to Herbie Hancock's very electric piano. And Herbie plays these kind of like high register lines that are really beautiful and that work really well against the acoustic sort of more organic sound of the bass. And then on top of that, you have Joe Henderson, who plays just a really nice solo over it. And I just think that yeah, it's a huge highlight of this thing. So let's see, this thing is going to be available on March 15th. It is available for pre-order right now. The only thing that I want to caution people with in terms of pre-orders is that, first of all, know that you can actually bundle these two titles. So the Johnny Lytle title and the Joe Henderson title, you can combine them within your order, and you can save some money. I think it's like $8. Just know that if you do that, they're not shipping them to you when they come out. You're going to have to wait until the Joe Henderson title is released, and then they'll ship it. And it's possible that you're going to be at the end of the line in terms of the order that they ship them, simply because it's easier to not have to pick and pack and instead to just ship the record. I'm only saying this because I've seen this happen too many times before, where that's exactly what happens, and there's so many people that lose their minds when something comes out that they pre-ordered and it happened to be like bundled with some other things in a shopping cart. You have to wait till the last thing's released in order to get it. So if you're one of those people that's going to stress you out, order them separately and don't save the $8, or just pick whichever one you're going to order, right? All right, so those are the two Jazz Dispensary titles, and now we can move into the Acoustic Sounds Contemporary Records series. All right, so the summation here for this entire series, again, there's 12 titles that are coming out starting in February, and so if you're like, wait, how does that make sense? It's because there's 2 titles coming out actually in October, and it makes sense that they come out together, is what I'll say. And you'll find out when we get there. So these are also all analog. These are mastered by Bernie Grunman, so not Kevin Gray, but Bernie Grunman, and he's done a fantastic job thus far with the series, in my opinion. These are all 180 gram pressings at QRP, so not RTI like Jazz Dispensary, but QRP, and they use Stoughton tip-on jackets, which obviously everybody loves. And similar to the Jazz Dispensary titles, these are also $30 each. So every single one of these titles is $30. So let's just dive in here. So the first one that's being released on February 23rd is Art Pepper's Smack Up. So this was 1960, I believe. Yeah, recorded in 1960. It might have been put out in 1961. On it, you've got Art Pepper, Jack Sheldon, Pete Jolly, Jimmy Bond, and Frank Butler. Some of these folks, well, at least Frank Butler was almost like borderline session musician for Contemporary Records. But this one, I guess what's to know is that this is not one of those records that pairs Art Pepper with Miles Davis's rhythm section, although there is one of those later in this series. But still, this is a fantastic title. If I was going to recommend a single track to preview, it might be Las Cuevas de Mario, which is the second track. It's a 7-minute piece, and it's really nice. The thing with Art Pepper is you kind of know what you're going to get into with almost anything that he's on, and certainly anything that he's a leader. He typically gets just really smoking rhythm sections that cook but that can also play beautifully. And Art Pepper, like borderline doesn't change his style even depending on like what the rest of the music is. He just plays just a gorgeous tone, really lyrical. Like he comes up with solos, improvised solos, but they're just almost like they could be songs songs on their own as soon as they come out of his horn. And so he continues that style across his contemporary catalog. And the interesting thing always to me, after reading Straight Life, which is his biography, I would encourage everyone to check that out. What's crazy to me is how many personal problems he was having during this period of time he was working for Contemporary and recording for them, and yet it doesn't seem to impact his playing whatsoever. It's just it's kind of shocking. All right, number 2. This is on March 15th, and it is Shelly Manne and His Men at the Black Hawk, Volume 1. Folks have been talking about wanting this to be included in the Contemporary Records series for a while, and when they say they want it included, what they also want is volumes 2, 3, and 4. And unfortunately, we didn't get that, but what we did get is volume 1, which I think is a good indicator that at some point they'll put out 2, 3, and 4. Hopefully they're not going to put out this and then do a box set of 1, 2, 3, and 4. So even though Shelly Manne may not be sort of first in line in terms of your preference for drummers, he's fantastic across the entire Contemporary Records series. He plays he did a lot of good work for like Atlantic after it. I think he gets a bad rap, and I think these sessions from these Black Hawk recordings are absolutely phenomenal. And part of the reason is because of the lineup. So you do have Joe Gordon on trumpet, Richie Kamuka on tenor sax, Victor Feldman on piano, and Monty Budwig on bass. These sessions were recorded, I forget over how many days, in 1959, again at the Black Hawk in San Francisco. And so there was just something magical either about how inspired they were to actually play that day, or maybe the acoustics. But this entire series, despite the fact that it's a live session, sounds absolutely phenomenal, and I would encourage everyone to check this out. I really like. The problem is I think about these sessions and I think about all 4 of them, and I have to compartmentalize what's on this one. Summertime is a very recognizable tune that opens the whole thing, but maybe Blue Daniel is the best one on here and that you should check out. It's like an 8.5 minute piece, but. Yeah, I don't know. I think one of the reasons why I like Shelly Manne so much is because he is still an ensemble player, even when he's the leader, right? So in some situations, you have guys like Art Blakey who just kind of dominate and they play so loud, and when it's their solo, they're going crazy. And don't get me wrong, Shelly Manne can certainly play, but I think he's more of an ensemble player, more supportive of some of the other musicians. So anyway, that's number 2 is Shelly Manne and His Men. All right, out on April 12th is kind of an abomination. Not really, but so okay, out on April 12th is Harold Land's The Fox. Love The Fox. Fantastic album. Problem is, wasn't originally put out on Contemporary Records. So they're including it in the series, I'm sure because it was reissued on Contemporary at some point, and because it's in the Kraft and Concord catalog, and they wanted to include it in the series. And all those things are fine. The problem is it was originally put out on Hi-Fi Jazz, and this is the original cover. They are not going to be going with this original cover. They're going for the way less inspired reissue cover that was put out on Contemporary, and I'll show you an example of what that looks like. So, here's the thing. Does it matter? It might to some. Probably the Contemporary cover is more familiar to a lot of folks, but it did originally come out here on Hi-Fi. So what to say about this? I would say out of all of these Contemporary titles, if you're going to get one, get this. And the reason, everybody's great on this, don't get me wrong, but the reason is a guy named Dupree Bolton. And I'm not going to get into his history, his troubled history, and the fact that he disappeared. You can read up on that online. But he's amazing. When you listen to him here, you're going to be like, this is the next Clifford Brown, this is the next Booker Little. And unfortunately, like those 2 other trumpeters, this guy was on the scene very briefly. But nevertheless, fantastic here. So who else do we have? We have Elmo Hope, Frank Butler, obviously Harold Land and Dupree Bolton, because I already mentioned them. And then we have Herbie Lewis. And I think that you just need to listen to the whole thing. But Mirror Mind Rose is perhaps the highlight and maybe the one that you should check out first. Okay, next up, Hampton Hawes's For Real. This is coming out on May 17th. You've got, it's right there on the cover. You have Harold Land back again. You've got Scott LaFaro, and you have Frank Butler again as well. This is really great, I think, because in terms of Hampton Hawes's records, I don't know. For me, he doesn't always stand out as a pianist, and yet here he really does. And I think part of the reason is that this isn't a trio record, and maybe he needs to just put a little bit more energy into playing because you also have the tenor, Harold Land's tenor. But this, for me, is perhaps Hampton Hawes's best record that he ever recorded. And so I think it's a fantastic choice here. This was originally released, when was it? It was recorded in 1958, so I think it was probably put out then as well. He does, let's see, I want to say that he nods to a few greats here in terms of, well, he does Crazology. Oh, okay, so that one wasn't written by Charlie Parker, but I think that Charlie Parker performed that at some point. But Crazology, anyway, is a great highlight on this thing. Also, by the time that this had come out, and now that I'm thinking about it, I have to completely go back on what I just said about this coming out in 1958. It was recorded in 58. It looks like this was put out in 1961. And the reason why I say that is because there is a Scott LaFaro obituary on the back. So I'm going to have to do my research and find out, but it sounds like they might have shelved this thing and then waited to put it out until after LaFaro's death. In any event, this thing really holds up. It's fantastic, and I'm super excited that they decided to include it. Moving right along, we've got Howard McGee's Maggie's Back in Town. Who's Maggie? Well, that was the nickname for Howard McGee. So this one's coming out on June 14th. It was originally released in 1961. And who else do we have on it? We have Shelly Manne, Phineas Newborn, and Leroy Vinegar. And the interesting thing about this one is that even though Howard McGee's titles can be hit or miss, some of them I just don't think were necessarily recorded that well, especially the early ones. Notable example, though, or notable exception, I'm sorry, is Dusty Blue, which was recently put out on Newland Recordings or Newland Records out of the UK. They did a reissue of that in their series, and that sounds fantastic. This is one of those sessions, though, that sounds really good. Like, Contemporary just did such a phenomenal job with their engineering at this time, and to be able to capture a legend like Howard McGee, on their label and have it sound as good and be able to hear this guy sound as good as he does, I just think is really exciting. There's a lot of nuance here with the format. Shelly Manne plays a lot of brushes. Phineas Newborn just sounds fantastic with his like sort of delicate touch on the keys. And Howard McGee's tone is just phenomenal. So I think this is one to look out for as well, among many, right? I mean, this thing's great. So if I was going to recommend a track or two, I would say the title track is one of my favorites. It's kind of like a slower swinging kind of thing. And then the other one is Sunset Eyes, which was actually contributed by Teddy Edwards, who's coming up next. But Sunset Eyes is another good one to check out. All right, so I just mentioned the track that was composed by Teddy Edwards that's on that Howard McGee title, Maggie's Back in Town. Well, here we have Teddy Edwards and Howard McGee, and we also have Phineas Newborn, and the title is Together Again with 4 exclamation points because they are super excited to be together again. But you swap out bass and drums here, so you've got Ray Brown and Ed Thigpen. So this comes out on July 12th. And what would I say about this thing? I don't even know. 1961. I feel like a lot of these titles are in that kind of like 1960, 1961 kind of window. But guess what? Contemporary is doing really fantastic stuff, especially in the stereo format during that period of time. They kind of like worked to perfect it in like 56, 57, and like 58. And that when they started putting these stereo titles out right about 1960, it blows you away, like how great they did stereo. I think they did it better than anybody else during this time period. If I was going to recommend a track for you to preview, I would say Misty. It's obviously an Errol Garner tune and kind of a classic. I just think they do a really good job here. There are some Teddy Edwards tracks on here as well as some Howard McGee stuff. There's a Charlie Parker one. There's a Ray Brown. So it's kind of a mix of like classics as well as stuff that was written by the folks on this thing. All right, next up is Prince Lasha's The Cry. Actually, technically, this is a Prince Lasha quintet featuring Sonny Simmons, and it's appropriately titled because I am just so upset with myself that I didn't find a copy of this when it was more affordable. This thing has gone for over $500 before. And here's the thing, I don't want to say rightly so, because I don't think any of the titles I don't think any jazz records should go for that much, but they just do. But this is one of the highlights really of the entire Contemporary Records catalog. and it's one of the most sort of, I don't know, artistic statements, if you will, I think. I mean, this thing is really phenomenal. So in addition to Prince Lasha and Sonny Simmons that I already mentioned, we have Gary Peacock and, let's see, Mark Proctor on bass. You have Gene Stone on drums. And I guess that's it. So this thing was recorded in 1962. It is a little bit more, it's not avant-garde like it's just pure free jazz, but there are a little bit more elements. It is a little bit more adventurous music, and it just sounds phenomenal. Like, if I'm going to direct you to anything, I would say the first two tracks on this thing are pretty good. So Congo Call and Bojangles are the first two. And I would just sort of preview that to give you a sense, because I do think that it kind of owes some to Ornette Coleman, but I also think that Prince Lasha and Sonny Simmons kind of have their own voice, and this wouldn't be the only one that they recorded together. In fact, I did pull out my copy of, so I don't have The Cry, but I did pull out my copy of Firebirds, which is another one. And this would be another one that would be exciting if they would try to tackle in the series. I guess we'll have to wait until next year to find out. But as it is, I am just really excited that they chose to include The Cry. And I got to be honest, this was the very first one out of all of these Contemporary Records titles that I decided to pre-order. All right, the next one is coming out on September 13th, and this is one that I don't have a copy of either, and it's a little bit unusual to include it in this series, and I'll kind of speak to that in a second. So it is Ben Webster's At the Renaissance. So this is a title that was first put out in 1985, but the content was recorded in 1960. So who do we have on this thing? It is Jimmy Rowles, Jim Hall, Red Mitchell, and Frank Butler. So very much a Contemporary Records kind of lineup. And Lester Koenig is still the producer, and it certainly has the hallmarks. It's just it wasn't first released in any format until 1985. So I didn't know very much about this. One thing I did know, though, and perhaps one of the reasons why it's being included is not just that it's Contemporary Records, but this has been reissued in an audiophile format before by none other than Analog Productions. So they put out a 245 RPM disc edition of this thing, and so therefore it must be that Chad Kassem believes that this is particularly great sounding. Now, I personally have never listened to it, but now we have, and by the way, that 45 RPM version goes for hundreds of dollars because it's out of print. So I think that's the reason why it's being included in this series. It's an opportunity for Acoustic Sounds and Analog Productions to put another version out. It's going to be 33 RPM, obviously. I don't know if this is going to be a new remastering or not. I'm not entirely sure. I don't even know actually who did that 45 RPM edition. I have no idea. But in any event, it is probably good, and I love Ben Webster, and so I don't know. We'll just, I guess we'll see what happens with that one. Okay, so October 11th is the date that they are squeezing in two releases, both by Art Pepper, and both are fantastic. The first one is Getting Together. So this one includes Conti Candoli, Jimmy Cobb, Wynton Kelly, and Paul Chambers. So you have that Miles Davis format, and then you add Conti Candoli as almost the Miles Davis kind of voice, I guess, on this thing. This is a real highlight, I think, of Art Pepper's catalog, and it's problematic to say that because he had so many great ones, but it is phenomenal. Recorded in 1960. I can't pick just one if I was going to tell you to listen to it. You should listen to the rendition of Whims of Chambers, which obviously was the title of a Blue Note record. But hear the version here. Hear it on this one. Bijou the Poodle is another good one, and then the title track Getting Together, which is on side 2. I think those are the ones to check out. But really, any opportunity to hear Art Pepper on Contemporary, and especially surrounded by that Miles Davis group. All right, so the other one that's coming out on October 11th that's by Art Pepper is Intensity, and this is another great one. This is a different lineup, very different lineup. So here you have Dolo Coker, Jimmy Bond, and Frank Butler. Frank Butler has been on so many of these, but didn't I led with at the beginning of this thing that he was basically the session drummer for Contemporary Records. So I'm a big fan of this thing. It came out in 1963, And there's a lot to love on this one. So it's called Intensity. It doesn't necessarily mean that every track is fast, although there are a lot of fast tracks. So I Can't Believe That You're in Love With Me is the opener, and that one's quick. I Love You is the second, and then Long Ago and Far Away. I might go for those first, just because I feel like I've heard Art Pepper in like a ballad context so many times, and it's not as surprising. But hearing just the ideas that he brings forward on this album in those faster pieces, I think is phenomenal. And something about this recording is just feels a little bit different. And so I'm really interested to hear how this edition is going to sound. And what I'm getting at is that it is a quartet format, so you do just have the single horn. It just feels like there's so much more space on this thing, and it really allows the cymbals to shimmer better, and it allows better detail in the bass, even on the original pressing. And so I'm really interested to hear, I guess, how this thing is going to sound in this latest series. All right, November 8th is another one that I don't have, so I actually think I may have led you astray when I said 3. It turns out there's 4 of these titles of the 14 that I don't have. So this is, I think this is an odd choice, but I'm going to cover it. So it's Helen Humes' Songs I Like to Sing. So obviously it's a vocalist. Helen Humes is a vocalist. And I was never particularly a huge fan of her style, I would suppose. I mean, just personal preference. There's other vocalists that I like a lot better. One of the reasons why this title may have been chosen is because of the stellar lineup that supports her. So on this thing, and I don't mean to take anything away from Helen Humes. There's going to be a lot of people who want to buy it, really first and foremost for her. In her music, but for me, not being as much of a fan, what kind of I took notice of was the fact that Art Pepper is in the lineup. You also have Leroy Vinegar, Shelley Mann, Barney Kessel, Bill Hood, Teddy Edwards. There's a lot of people on this thing. Ben Webster, Al Porcino, Jack Sheldon, Stu Williamson. It's like a larger format. You even have strings on this thing. So my guess is that these musicians are used, in separate formats, and they're not all in this massive orchestra on every track. But in any event, this is included, like I said, November 8th, and I'm probably not going to get this one, but I sure will be interested to hear what other people's feedback is once they get this. All right, so the last one is on December 6th, and this may come as a surprise. Guess what? It is Way Out West by Sonny Rollins. This happens to be my original. I do have the Go West box set over here, which I've talked about in videos before, and I had that interview where I was talking to Nick Phillips because he was the producer of it, and so I've covered it in great detail, and so I wasn't planning on covering it again. What I did want to call out was that they're releasing it as an individual standalone title. So for all the folks who were hesitant to pick up the box set, first of all, the box set's fantastic, and I don't have any regrets for getting it. But for those of you who waited and want to get it just on its own, well, guess what? Now you can. You do have to wait until December 6th to get it, but this is a phenomenal record. It's Sonny Rollins in trio format. I think that the timing of its inclusion is excellent as well, because we know that the Sonny Rollins Night at the Village Vanguard is included in the Tone Poet series, which is going to be more formally announced here very, very soon. And that's also him in a trio format. And so being able to get, I guess within however many months they're going to spread these apart between the Blue Note release and the Contemporary Records release, it's just kind of fun to be able to get some of these great Rollins trio sessions in a new sort of, audiophile kind of format. So, I don't need it because I already have it, but, and I do think that it's the same Bernie Grundman pressing. No reason for them to remaster it, just a year apart or not even a year apart. But in any event, now people have a way to get it for those who didn't want to grab that box set. Alrighty, so that's it, right? So you got the 2 Jazz Dispensary titles. You got the 12 Contemporary Records Acoustic Sound Series titles. I think this is a solid list. It really is. And I'm really glad actually that they picked out some of these that, I don't want to say I don't want to say lesser, well, at least lesser known by, say, the masses, because a lot of these records I've been trying to pick up over time, just to kind of fill out my contemporary records collection, and some of these that they chose are particularly difficult to get. It's not like they loaded up the list with Andre Previn and Shelly Manne titles, although the Shelly Manne title that they chose is fantastic. So if I'm going to say across these 14 titles, what are the 5 that I'm most excited about? And so I'm including the Jazz Dispensary in here. Certainly Power to the People, already pre-ordered that one. That one is going to be one that is going to sell out, I guarantee it, and it's going to be difficult to get, like, say, a year later. So I'm not saying you have to like go and get it right now. I'm not saying that, but I don't think you have that much time after its release before you have to decide if it's something you're going to get. That's just my opinion. Obviously, I have no idea. All right, so that's one. Harold Land's The Fox is another one that I think is one of the best titles here. I do wish that they used the original cover. However, it is phenomenal music, and look up Dupree Bolton, like I said. That one's going to be phenomenal as well. The Prince Lasha Quintet, The Cry, that's the 3rd title that I'm like just a hard recommend. What else would I say? I'm going to leave Sonny Rollins out because I already have it, and so therefore I'm not going to get it, right? But otherwise, that might be one of the ones that I would include here. In fact, probably would. I think Art Pepper's Intensity. I think that one, even over Getting Together, that arguably has a better lineup. I think Intensity is a phenomenal session. And what would my 5th be? I'm debating between Hampton Hawes's For Real and Howard McGee's Maggie's Back in Town. I may have to go with Hampton Hawes's For Real. I think that one's fantastic. Another Harold Land session, and obviously Scott LaFaro, and it's just it's really stellar. So those would be the 5. Gosh, but Shelly Manne. So here's the problem. Those are the 5. I may end up getting more, but at the very least, at this moment, I already ordered the Joe Henderson. I already ordered the Prince Lasha because those are no-brainers for me. And now I just need to probably add a few more of these. But anyway, that's what I'm doing. I try to give you some tracks so you could go and preview, and you could decide for yourself which ones you're most excited about. So yeah, that's it for today. Thanks for sticking with me. There's obviously going to be a couple more videos coming up because some of these other announcements that we've been getting, I just feel the need to like address them and bring some of this stuff to your attention. So I'm sure that I'll be making more very soon. So as always, thanks for sticking with me, and yeah, I'll see you next time.